2,000 pages for the Affordable Care Act. How many pages, when you went into the secret room, how many pages are there?
It's 2 bound books about that thick. But the worst part is, even if you're an attorney, if you're not a trade attorney, it doesn't mean anything to look at all this stuff because you don't know still what's being negotiated. So I've learned enough of this because I've had enough reviews and things that what you're looking for, you can ask specific questions. You want to know where something would be or how it would be covered. And really, that's the magic of it. Like one little word they're hanging a lot of heaviness on, which I think is very arbitrary. But secondly, you look for the combined bracketed text. That's the areas where they don't have agreement yet. And as you can imagine, countries like Malaysia and Vietnam are often set aside from the other countries because they just don't have the infrastructure around issues around labor. I mean, they have one union. It's a government union. It's not really a union. They call it a union that everyone belongs to and they run. Well, that's not a union. And for them to actually implement unions the way we recognize it, we have to have something stronger than what we have if you're going to have anything really in place. So, but the U.S. Trade Representative's Office last year, for example, and I did a quote that I don't like to, I'm repeating, and I shouldn't, but I didn't usually want to do it with the media, but we were really frustrated because the Trade Representative lied to us yet again, and we get lied to a lot. And they're trying to claim there's a surplus with every country we have a trade agreement. Well, it's clearly not true based on the numbers. So what they've done is they've cooked up some new numbers, which are re-exports. So this is what a re-export there is that they count in order to try to justify a surplus. Something comes in from Japan to LA on a boat. The forklift takes it off, puts it in a storage facility. A week later, they put it onto a boat and it goes to Mexico. That's now an export by the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. Other than a couple forklift jobs, it's not really realistic that that's trade by any formula they have, and they count it. So that day that they kind of lied to us yet again on that, we were a little frustrated, and I said, basically they're trying to baffle us with bullshit. That's their approach. We're treated like kids at the kid table, yet we've got to vote on this. So we've been very, very frustrated. So last year, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, my fellow freshmen, there were 5 people who were very earnest and wanted to read the whole thing. I don't know what they thought they'd get out of it, but they were very earnest, wanted to read the whole thing up to that point. So they were given 2 sets of books. First of all, I don't know why they got 2 different sets of books. They got 2 different sets of books. They read a chapter like a week. And then one of them came up to me and asked a question. I said, well, what's the combined bracketed text from that segment? They go, what's that? They didn't even tell them what to read, what to look for. So that's the problem, is we've also been dealing with not the White House, but the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, which is the extension of the White House, that has not been very forthright with the public or members of Congress on this. And if it's as good as they claim, show it to us, right? Let everyone see how great it is. Let's see how many jobs we're going to create. But the fact that it doesn't have that is a real problem. Yes?
You did mention that this is classified and secret. Why?
That's a really good question. I mean, partially it's in negotiations, right? That's their argument. But the fact that they've got it so secret for even members of Congress that we can't write any text, we couldn't have any staff with us. And anyone knows, we rely on our staff a lot, right? Because they're the ones who all have expertise in areas. I'm a generalist in many things. I become maybe in a couple areas an expert. That's why you need your staff with. So it's really, that was one of our fights, was why are they saying this is classified when, we sat through one of these classified presentations with Leader Pelosi, and Leader Pelosi has been very helpful in scheduling a lot of the meetings. And I asked them then, they go, what's the classified part of here? And they go, well, anything in text. So it was actual quote. There was like 2-3 words in an hour-and-a-half presentation. But they do it because, and I found this also sometimes they do it for defense reasons, then you can't say something. So I've learned from more senior members on some of these, they don't go to them because later they'll find out they don't want to be hamstringed by now what they can say and not say. But there really is no justification, in my opinion, for the classified status of it. Other issues or more on TPP, I'm glad.
Well, let's just get off the subject.
Sure. No, that's good.
Maybe I was dreaming, but I thought I could seen on TV a vapor cigarette commercial. Is that legal or?
I honestly don't know. I really couldn't tell you on that.
Then
Sorry.
it said the American Tobacco Company was paying for this ad or something else. Maybe I was dreaming.
No, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Are the Republicans gonna really push for the CAGSL? Are they gonna trade that for something? What's gonna happen there?
So the Keystone?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's completely up to the White House. I don't know why they waited almost 2 years to do whatever they're gonna do. That's part, you know, it's a little bit of a frustration for some of us, because we're like, it's completely in their hands, and the Republicans are gonna keep pulling these imaginary votes to try to make a point. I do think, though, I think there's the president who said once, and I did like this, he said, you know, he wants to invest more in infrastructure, period, and all they can think about is one project of infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know, if they really believe about the jobs that can be created through that infrastructure, why aren't we actually investing in infrastructure?
Right.
I mean, the American Society of Civil Engineers has given the country a D+ for our infrastructure. 16%, 1 out of every 6 bridges in the country is old enough to be eligible for Medicare. Right? So we kind of need to have those dollars to reinvest, and that's one of the things that the president, you know, has proposed, but it will never happen while the Republicans are controlling the House on a budget. But, you know, I wish, you know, my 3 pillars I always talk about for the economy are investing in education, investing in research and development, and investing in our infrastructure. Those 3 things are kind of crucial to having an economy that goes, you know, infrastructure gets jobs right now, plus it helps rebuild the things we need to rebuild. Research and development, unfortunately, because of a lot of bad past trade deals, we've lost a lot of manufacturing and other jobs that we still excel in certain areas, so we kind of have to double down on what we excel in. And education, clearly, everyone knows, the higher education generally have a better standard of living, and we want to make sure that people have access, and that the barrier shouldn't be the cost of education. So those are 3 things that I want to focus on when we talk about the budget and stuff. And but you know, Keystone, they're going to keep having votes. None of them will mean anything, because it's completely up to the White House to make their final decision. I think, you know, now with gas prices have gone down a little, there's less interest, maybe intensity by the public, or if there ever was intensity from the public, but, you know, certain sectors of it. Yes?
I have a question about the farm bill, especially regarding with food share.
I'm sorry, someone called, I missed that, sorry.
That's okay. With food share, with also, I know that the farm bill was reauthorized last session, I believe, or how it was.
Well, I think it was done through, I believe, the Crown of, I think they pulled it halfway through last year, because it's supposed to be done, well, wait, I'm sorry, you're right, I think it might have.
Like they were able to pass it last second, like, and then they, for how long, for like a year or
Well,
whatever.
this year it'll come back, because we have to do, part of the bill is, as you know, the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, right?
Right, yes.
And last year, what they did is they separated it out, so it didn't pass originally, but then after it came back from the conference committee, we did resolve it.
Yeah.
But this year, we know there are going to be the same fights around that.
And then also, I just want to know if you guys were going to try to, at least on the Democrat side, to try to, for those, because I think that was what I'm going to ask about is like, was in the stimulus with those that, if they got extra food share money, if they were still paying, if utilities were included with that, and because I recently had to have an update, and then I told them that I pay my utilities with it, and they cut basically about $120 to $130 a month.
Yeah, it's going to be a battle, because, you know, our newest member from Wisconsin, Glenn Grothman, is one of those folks that thinks there's a welfare abuse problem in the country, and they're living back 20 years ago when that was an issue. But there's going to be a big fight on it again. It's been signaled already. We actually think there's going to be problems on all the appropriation bills, clearly, again. But that one was especially a problem. And the SNAP is really where most of the attention got on last time, so I'm not quite sure on the food share. You know, obviously, I think we'll try to sustain what we've had in the past around that. But the big fight will be around the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. 2 years ago, some of you may know or might remember, I went and I lived on SNAP for a week, because some of us were trying to illustrate, you know, 2/3 of the people are women and children disabled. You go up to 91% when you include working poor. I mean, this isn't like a traditional welfare program like Glenn thinks everything is. It's something that is one of the best ways to help kids stay out of poverty. You know, it provides $31.50 a week in assistance per person. And because of the cuts that happened last year when the final version came, but we were a lot closer to the Senate side, it's now $29 something a week. And so I lived for $31.50, and you buy a bag of oranges at $6.50, and then you figure out pretty quick, and your ramen noodles and your peanut butter and your bread, and you don't have a whole lot there, and they're going to fight it again as a welfare program. So I think most of the public fight will center around that.
Thank you for doing that, by the way.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, again, one of the things that we can do is we have the bully pulpit. If we're not going to be able to pass legislation, then we need to illustrate it. And I think most reasonable people, when you find out a program, because that then allows me to talk about those stats. And if people then realize, it's not the welfare of someone being lazy and driving a Cadillac, and now they're busy talking about spending it on, I guess you can spend it on blocks of cheese, but not shredded cheese. They're trying to pass it.
I think that was when one of the state representatives had made an illustration.
Evan Goike,
Yes, he did that. Yeah, which was really nice.
Yeah. But it's the idiocy that we have sometimes.
Or you can't have regular potatoes.
Yeah.
Because in the proposal they want to change it or they want the standards to be the same as the families on WIC. I think in the same diet, that type of thing. It's
No, it's.
Your work on that, the right to vote, as it leads to that amendment to the Constitution. Thank you for that, by the way.
Thank you.
How's that going?
Yeah, actually, I think really, really well. So Keith and I have started to take it down the road on this issue. So Keith came to Madison, I went up to Minneapolis, and he and I are talking about trying to go around the country as we do some progressive caucus events. We're going to piggyback him with voting constitutional amendment to have explicit right to vote. Just to give a little background, and I'll come back to some specifics. Keith and I introduced a constitutional amendment to have an explicit right to vote in the Constitution. There is not an explicit right to vote in the Constitution. It's certainly implied. We talk about discrimination in voting, but there's no affirmative explicit right. And if you think about it, when the Constitution was written, 20% of the people in the country could vote, white male property owners over 21. And that's not where we are as a society, and it is the great equalizer. So it's something that's of unbelievable importance if you're going to have a democracy, that the Koch brothers and my brother and I have one thing in common. It's not our political ideology, it's not our bank accounts, but it's the fact you each have one vote. So we need to have that enshrined in the Constitution. What that means is, if Wisconsin or any other state passes a law that makes it harder for me to vote, they have to prove they haven't affected my constitutional right, as opposed to now, I have to prove I've been harmed by any entity that changes the voting laws. It completely shifts the burden around. So the positive news is, one, that Keith and I are cranking it up. Every week we take a new group on the phone that deals with this. We're trying to get their support. NAACP is all on support now with us. Reverend Jackson's been going around the country getting big city councils to pass resolutions in favor of it. We had 25% more sponsors in the first 2 months of this year than we had all last session. So that's moving forward. And we just did something with Fair Vote at American University where they had all different voting and campaign finance reforms. And I think we were the second highest voted by everyone who watched that stuff of intensity, why we need to get this done. So we're moving with it hard and fast, and we want to take it on the road around the country. Because I think when people understand that if you become a citizen, there's a question you get asked, and it says, what's your most important right as an American? And the answer to that question is your right to vote. And there is no explicit right to vote. All the more reason why we need to get it done. So I have a lot of passion around that issue as well. Trade right now is taking up most of my time, but we do carve out time every week to try to bring in more support, and we are going to take it on the road.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Has Hillary Clinton taken a position on the TPP yet?
No, and I don't expect her to. She, in her book, took a position against ISDS, it's Investor State Dispute Settlement, and there was an article talking about that, and her campaign confirmed that those are her thoughts on that, but she hasn't taken any other stance on it, and my guess is that she won't. It's, what they said, actually, we did kind of ask this question. Rosa DeLauro, who I adore, she's a wonderful member from Connecticut, who I want to have her energy level in 2 decades. That she's every day out there working so hard on every issue, and she's leading our group on trade. And she had the campaign folks over at her house. So a lot of us just wanted to hear what they had to say. And when someone asked a question on this, they said basically, look, we can't take a stance on every single issue that's coming through every week in Congress because we'd be busy always, doing that. We're putting the campaign together, and I didn't find that completely, unfair. I do think on trade, I'd like to know where she stands because it's clearly a big, big issue, but I don't think they're going to come out on every single issue that will be coming before us. So, yes.
Are you happy to hear that Bernie is running?
I am very happy we have a primary, right? The problem was, you didn't have a primary, or Lincoln Chafee was the only person, former Republican turned independent, turned Democrat. Whew, it's a mouthful. It would be hard to have a real debate and to keep Hillary as strong as she needs to be on our core democratic values. Also, I want the person tested, whoever's coming out of that process, I want them to have the same test Republicans are going to have, right? Because it does matter how you talk about things and what exposure you have and questions you get. So primary is very valuable. No one should be against having a primary, no matter who you're supporting. It's good for the potential nominee. I am yet waiting to see if Bernie's running a race to be president or Bernie's running a race to keep Hillary Clinton in check. And I'll leave it at that, because I'll leave it at that. And you know what, we'll stay 10 more minutes, because that way you're getting all but 10 minutes. How's that? Is that a good deal? All right, thanks. Yes?
Every once in a while, I read that the Republicans might try to finagle the Electoral College by, congressional districts or whatever. Is there any chance we could get rid of the Electoral College and have the president elected? And do you think that could happen, or do you think there'd be such an uproar that?
Yeah, I don't think it would happen with this Congress, I mean, first we got to tie our shoes, and then maybe chew the gum, and then we'll try both at once, And I just don't think something that big of an idea would come out of this Congress. And I don't see a way that I don't think they can manipulate it their way necessarily, so I don't think, and we still have the White House, so they know it wouldn't make it anywhere, so I don't think it's part of any priority that they have.
So you don't think the states will go ahead and try to do that, do you think? Because didn't they bring it up in Michigan?
Yeah, and we had something introduced in Wisconsin and other places on it, but I don't think any of that would be reality necessarily. I think the real fight we have still is around campaign finance, though, because don't forget when we had the Crownibus, the big budget bill in December that came before us, it also included bringing us back to the bad old days of derivatives pre-2008, or back to that era, and included campaign finance upping the limits for big donors so they're not capped on how much they give. So they are definitely still aggressive on that. So, Gary.
Since currency has been the biggest factor in the loss of American jobs over the last 40 or 50 years, and since it's not part of this TPP, and since Congress is required by the Constitution to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin, is there any possibility that we could introduce a separate legislation?
No, absolutely. I think, in fact, I don't want to say this definitively, but I believe Alan Grayson may have talked about something like this, introducing a bill around it. So I could definitely see something being introduced around that.
And push that?
Yeah. So, yeah, and I've introduced a bill around trade actually to ban the use of ISDS in any trade deal in the future. We've had a specific proposal, and Elizabeth Warren's been very, very outspoken on ISDS, because that is one of the crazier provisions that's in there.
If all the labor is the same, the jobs are going to come back here. It's just going to happen. If their labor is equal to ours, when the currency change, the jobs are going to come back.
In fact, some, and that's the thing, is some actually have started coming back, especially in relation to China, because they still don't have the right equipment, the right talents that we've had in doing a lot of the work we did for quality control, and companies have sent some jobs back. But you bring Vietnam in, and then all of a sudden you're going to go back to, in fact, one of the interesting things, I don't know if I said this, and I've had we've done 5 listening sessions the last 2 days, so if I say the same thing twice, I'm sorry, but Central American countries, we had some of my colleagues went down to the Organization of American States in Panama, and they're worried that they're going to lose jobs to Vietnam if we pass this. And they already, I visited the sweatshops, the maquilas in El Salvador, where people are paid $3 a day, and they're worried that they're going to get raided. You can kind of tell that slippery slope. So, yes.
The amendment is passed to the United States Constitution, the move to amend movement. It says corporations are not equal and money is not free speech. Will Congress pass some decent campaign finance
Well, it's a large question in the sense that, first of all, you have to have the constitutional amendment passed, right?
That's
Through
what I'm saying.
which,
If it is passed, then you still have to pass laws.
well, at least that would take care of the patch on Citizens United,
Right.
right? But there's still plenty of other problems. I mean, hopefully you think, it's a lot of ifs. I don't think this Congress is gonna pass it. You know, there's about 4 different amendments that deal with Citizens United, of which I support all of them, but the one I really support is that one, the move to amend one, because I think the language is the cleanest, and they're doing the smartest job by doing the grassroots votes in the communities. But that would be a heavy lift through this Congress with Republicans, because don't forget, not only do Republicans think very differently than we do on campaign finance, but you're even asking elected officials who got elected by the current system to change the system to potentially not get reelected. I mean, let me get through trade first. But it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift. Yes.
Do you have any sense that there is going to be real movement on anti-fracking in the bomb trains? Congress going to do anything about that?
Yeah, in the, what, I missed the last part.
And the bomb trains, the trains that
Oh,
are
gotcha.
exploding because they've
Yeah.
got unsafe oil cars?
So we had Secretary Jewell with the Progressive Caucus a few weeks back, and we gave her an earful on fracking because they put out their new regulations on public lands that deal with methane, and that's about it, really. There's a few other things, but it's about methane. So we said, first of all, we brought up the chemical cocktail, because that's one that just drives me crazy, which is related to the train issue, which is, you know, we don't know what's going in there. They're accepting the industry argument that it's a trade secret.
Yeah.
Now, you don't frack because of that. You frack because of the equipment and everything else. I mean, to take that argument it's a pretty poor argument. We really gave her an earful on that. But also, you know, something that gets in the groundwater, we don't know what's in there. Obviously, there's other air issues. There's the whole water use, how much water it takes. That's a big issue for a lot of areas. Now there's the earthquake issue in Oklahoma and Texas. A lot of problems out there. There's also some worker safety on the wells that's not really addressed adequately, in my opinion. On the train cars, I did raise that issue as well, because we've had 2 different people in the 2nd Congressional District raise it. One was the mayor of Madison, and the other was the Ho-Chunk Nation. 2 very, very different, governmental entities. But they said, if you got a train coming through, and you don't know what's in that, and there's a spill, because it's part of your trade secret mix, then how can you, take care of either the lands for the Ho-Chunk or for the community in Madison? So she said she's gonna get back to me. I don't have an answer yet where we're at on that, but clearly it's an issue, and we've been trying to raise it. And like I said, we got it from very different, sources within the district.
Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I was curious what it's like to work with some of the people on the other side of the aisle, the Tea Party. That must be interesting, forging those alliances. I was also, I'm just going to throw out, curious if there's any news in terms of Alex. I know you make connections there. And maybe also, you could just wrap things up by, where do you see the future? I mean, if you could put your finger up in the political wind, I mean, we've got, I still think, a huge base out there for progressive issues that could be supported, but of course, we're up against, corporations who are really mobilized around their agendas, so.
So I'm going to do the middle one first. I'm going to have you repeat the first one because I forgot it. For that one. So Alec, I don't really have too much of an update because honestly, it is a lot more on the state legislative side. However, Center for Media and Democracy out of Madison, Wisconsin is the #1 place in the country that's dealing with ALEC issues. I can't suggest people give money. It's against my ethics rules to do that. However, I think they have a donation page on their website. But it's a great place because they're doing some really amazing work around ALEC, especially, as well as many other things. They're the ones who caught when Walker tried to change the Wisconsin idea. They're the ones who caught all that. So, first question, please repeat.
Oh, just working with the Tea
Party. Gotcha. Okay. So, I look at this with whether it's a Tea Party Republican or any Republican, my attitude, and quite honestly, there's some really conservative Democrats out there that also I got to deal with at the level, you find out what you have in common versus what you don't. So, Thomas Massey across the hall from me is considered a Tea Party Republican. In all reality, he's a libertarian. He is truly a libertarian. And he and I have a lot of common beliefs on things like hemp and national security and other issues. So I come in and talk to him based on what we have in common. I don't say, hey, should we increase taxes on the wealthy? Because I know that that's not not the best way to, connect with him. But instead, I'm like, hey, this trade agreement, this is, you see that ISDS stuff, and sure enough, we then can work together on stuff. So it's really pretty much common sense stuff, but you find out what you got in common and try to work with them. Now, granted, there's a few, I don't really think Louis Gohmert and I are going to be putting any bills together. I'm just saying. And there's a few people like that would prefer that I burn in hell. I understand. So I'm not going to try to work. But out of 435, I think a good 430 at least I can still try to work with, and I will try to do that. I'll do the wrap up, and I just had one other question too. I just want to make sure your hand was up, and then I do have to go. I appreciate that. So I will catch you though, because your hand was up. I'll do the wrap up after. Let me do your question, and then I can end on a positive note. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Would you explain your position for or against labeling GMOs in foods that we consume?
Yeah, I don't. Someone asked me this earlier today, and I forgive my ignorance on knowing what bill is out there right now. I know there is a bill that would ban states from having, I think, individual labeling, but I don't know if there's anything else out there. So that's one of those I have to get back to people because it hasn't been at the forefront of a committee I'm on right now. Right. I look at it as there's GMOs and there's GMOs. All right. There's some that are very different than things that are technically considered genetically modified by the definition, but aren't. So I think that on the stuff we had, I used to have a bill in the legislature for labeling GMOs. But I do think that we have to be very careful on how we call GMOs because there is a very wide definition, and some things I don't think would be included, and some things should be more than included. Is that fair?
Right,
Yeah,
there's
okay.
hybrid and then there's GMO.
Right, exactly, thank you. However, by definition, they're all considered GMO. And so that's, I think, the complexity. So I don't want to say I'm for labeling GMOs because I actually had a bill saying that in the legislature, so clearly, I've got a track record on it. But there is a difference on the definition, and that's why, I just want to make sure that that's understood. So then let me end on this. So I am, the other night I said very optimistic. John Nichols, I was with John Nichols and Katrina Vanden Heuvel from The Nation magazine in Spring Green because they're celebrating their 150th anniversary. I shouldn't say very optimistic, but I'm optimistic.